A black family was denied their hotel room on a stormy night, turned away with a flimsy excuse called policy. The clerk, Dylan, thought he was just following rules, but his fear carried the sting of something much deeper. What he didn't know was that Marcus Ellis, the man he rejected, had both the knowledge and power to flip the story overnight. And when dawn broke, the same family walked back in, not as guests, but as the new owners of the hotel that shut them out.
The rain came sideways across Route 29, a thin, cold curtain that blurred the glow of passing headlights into streaks of white fire. The Wayfarer Inn rose from the storm like a tired sentinel, its beige facade streaked with runoff, the flickering sign buzzing against the gray sky. Marcus Ellis held the glass door open for his family. Naomi hurried Lila through first, pulling the girl's hood tight against the wind, while Ruth, Marcus's mother, followed with careful, deliberate steps. The four of them looked like travelers carved out of patience, wet, road-weary, but still holding themselves upright, as if dignity were a coat you never took off, no matter how heavy it became. The lobby was empty except for the smell of floor wax and the quiet hum of the vending machine. Behind the counter, a young man in a pressed shirt, Dylan Hart, 26, straightened as they entered. His tie was a fraction too tight, and the way he adjusted it revealed nerves rather than professionalism. His eyes darted from Marcus to Naomi to the damp suitcase she carried, then back again. Something behind those eyes shifted, subtle but sharp, like a door closing in the dark. Marcus offered a polite nod. "Evening, we have a reservation, Ellis." He spoke with the calm tone of someone used to being measured, to proving ordinary things didn't need explanation. Dylan hesitated just long enough for the pause to feel deliberate. "We're fully booked," he said, voice neutral but brittle. His gaze flicked toward the key rack behind him. 3 brass fobs still hung there, gleaming under the yellow light like quiet witnesses. Naomi frowned. "That can't be right. We confirmed this morning." She reached into her purse, pulled out the folded reservation printout, and laid it neatly on the counter. Rainwater from her sleeve darkened the paper's corner. Dylan glanced at it but didn't touch it. "Corporate policy," he said quickly, rehearsed, like a phrase memorized from a script. "No local stays, no exceptions. It's, security reasons." His words stumbled near the end, as though they were tripping over something unseen. Marcus's brows lifted slightly. "We're from Richmond," he said. "That's 2 hours away. We're not local." He tapped the printed confirmation with one finger. The clerk's hand hovered near the service bell, not ringing it, but ready. His throat worked. "I can't, I'm sorry, sir. We've had incidents." His tone dipped into apology, but the words themselves built a wall. He looked away, as if eye contact might make the decision personal. For a long moment, no one spoke. The lobby clock ticked. The rain outside whispered against the glass. Naomi exhaled slowly, folding her arms around Leela's shoulders. "My daughter's cold," she said, keeping her voice even. "We've been on the road since noon. Please, just check the system." Dylan's jaw twitched. "I'd lose my job if I override policy." He said it like an excuse that had been used before, worn smooth by repetition, safe in its vagueness. He glanced up toward the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. The red light blinked. Marcus followed his gaze and understood more than Dylan realized. "So that's what this is," he murmured. He looked not angry yet, but measured, calculating. Dylan dicked the countertop, betraying unease. "I'm not risking my job," he said, lower now. "There've been complaints about who we, rent to. I'd just follow the notes." Ruth, silent until now, stepped closer. The lines on her face deepened under the lobby's sterile light. "Son," she said quietly, "sometimes following notes means forgetting how to read right from wrong." The young man didn't answer. His hand twitched toward the bell again. Naomi gathered the reservation back, her movement slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. She folded it twice and slipped it into her coat pocket. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but laced with steel. "Come on, Marcus, let's go." Marcus turned one last time toward Dylan. For a fraction of a second, the two men's eyes met, one uncertain, one unbroken. The kind of look that holds both restraint and promise, like thunder waiting for sky. Outside, the rain hit harder. The glass door side closed behind them, shutting out the hum of the lobby. Lila reached for her grandmother's hand, and Ruth squeezed it tight. The neon vacancy sign above flickered once, sputtering in the storm, as if even it didn't believe its own message. They walked back into the night, wet, silent, and burning with a quiet kind of fury that had nowhere to go. But not for long. They stood beneath the narrow awning as the rain thickened, hammering the parking lot in relentless silver lines. The neon vacancy sign sputtered above them, its red hum flickering through puddles that mirrored the word like a cruel joke. The air smelled of wet asphalt and cheap detergent from the lobby's overworked vents. Naomi pulled her coat tighter around Lila and tucked the girl's curls beneath the collar. "We'll find another place," she whispered, though the nearest hotel was 20 miles down a dark stretch of highway. Her voice was soft, but her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the sting of something she'd seen too many times and never gotten used to. Ruth didn't speak. She stared at the gleaming puddles under the streetlight, eyes unfocused. In her silence lived 1,000 remembered moments. Bus rides taken in silence, rest stops where smiles didn't mean welcome, classrooms that taught her more about exclusion than math. Her breath came out slow. "Every generation," she murmured, barely audible, "pays the same toll in different coins." Lila's small voice broke the quiet. "Why would he do that, Daddy? We didn't do anything wrong." Marcus crouched beside her. The rainwater beaded on his jacket like scattered glass. He searched for words gentle enough for a child, but honest enough not to lie. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people let fear make their choices for them." She frowned. "But he was the one afraid?" Marcus nodded. "That's the hard part, baby. Fear looks different, depending on which side of the counter you're standing on." He straightened, his eyes lifting toward the building. Behind the glass, the lobby lights glowed sterile and still. Dylan stood near the desk, phone to his ear, pretending to work. Marcus knew that look, the way someone convinces themselves that following a rule makes them innocent. He'd seen it before, in contractors who'd cut corners to keep a bid, in investors who'd smile through promises they'd never sign. It wasn't new, it was just more personal now. Inside, Dylan wasn't thinking of power. He was thinking of protocol, of a memo that had hit his inbox weeks earlier, a risk mitigation reminder written in vague legal language. Marcus had read the same kind of memo in his own business days, words that seemed harmless until you saw what they gave permission for. The memo at the Wayfarer had one phrase that was practically code: discourage high-risk walk-ins. No one defined what high risk meant. They didn't have to. The silence did the explaining. Marcus's chest tightened. He'd spent 5 years clawing his way up, from drywall dust and long commutes to polished shoes and property blueprints. He knew hospitality from both sides, how much grace it took to welcome a stranger and how much cost hid behind that grace. He'd studied hotels that failed and ones that rose again, their fate sealed not by decor, but by leadership. And he knew this place, the Wayfarer Inn. It wasn't thriving. He'd seen the name 2 weeks earlier in a distressed assets bulletin, a dry spreadsheet he read before sunrise over black coffee and a stubborn streak. Wayfarer Inn, pending foreclosure. A line item no longer worth a headline. He hadn't thought much of it then. But now, standing in the rain that the awning couldn't fully keep out, something inside him began to align. Fate doesn't shout, it whispers. Naomi caught the look in his eyes, that stillness he got right before he made a move that changed things. "Don't," she said softly. "Not tonight. Let it go." Her tone wasn't fear, it was fatigue. The kind of exhaustion that comes from too many quiet injustices endured for the sake of peace. But Ruth heard the unspoken thought forming in Marcus's silence. Her voice came out low and strong, like a line drawn in the sand. Or do. Naomi turned to her, startled. Ruth didn't flinch. Her coat was soaked at the shoulders, but her posture hadn't bent an inch. "I've spent a lifetime teaching my granddaughter how to walk through storms," she said. "I'm done teaching her to swallow them." The words hung there, heavy as thunder. Marcus looked from his mother to his wife, then down at Lila, her small hands clutching the hem of his jacket, eyes searching his face for direction. Something shifted inside him. The frustration cooled, condensing into focus. His mind, trained by years of problem-solving, began to turn over possibilities. The memo, the bank's report, the empty parking lot, the brass fobs that still hung on the wall. He glanced once more at the glowing red sign above them. Vacancy. The irony burned, but beneath the bitterness, there was clarity. He saw not rejection, but opportunity. The exposed flaw in a system that pretended it was unbreakable. Naomi saw the change, the light of calculation behind his calm. "Marcus," she said again, quieter this time, "whatever you're thinking, just remember what matters most." He smiled faintly, a promise more than a reassurance. "Exactly," he said. "What matters most?" The rain eased for a moment, softening to mist. The air smelled of wet earth and possibility. Ruth lifted her chin toward the hotel one last time. "Let them keep their keys tonight. Tomorrow, you take the door." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The decision was already made. Not in anger, but in purpose. And as the family stepped off the curb toward their car, the Wayfarer Inn loomed behind them, unaware that it had just locked out its future owners.
Marcus stood beneath the awning, rain dripping from his sleeves, the glow of the vacancy sign painting faint red across his face. His heart was steady now, not angry, just alert. The refusal had already become more than a slight. It had turned into an equation, and equations, he knew, could be solved. He reached into his soaked jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen flickered under droplets as he thumbed through his contacts. The world around him narrowed. The rain softened into background noise. The hum of passing cars faded. He found the name he wanted, Avery Chin, and pressed call. Avery answered before the second ring. "Marcus," he said, voice dry and amused, like he'd been expecting the call all along. "You only ring me this late when someone's in trouble, or you're about to make money off someone else's mistake. Which is it tonight?" "Little of both," Marcus replied. He turned, watching through the lobby glass as Dylan pretended to shuffle papers behind the desk. The young man's face was pale in the fluorescent light, half hidden behind the reflection of the storm. "You know the Wayfarer Inn off Route 29. "The Wayfarer?" Avery chuckled. "That place is a slow leak with carpet stains older than my first car. Why?" Marcus didn't smile. "Because it just refused to honor a reservation I had with my family. Corporate policy, according to the kid at the desk." Avery's tone sharpened. "You sure it wasn't an honest mistake?" "I'm sure," Marcus said quietly. "And I'm not calling for an apology. I'm calling because I remember seeing that name in your distressed assets feed last month. I think it's on a bank's watch list." There was a pause. Marcus could hear typing on the other end, the faint click of mechanical keys echoing under the rain. "Hold on. Yeah, here it is. First Horizon Asset Recovery has it flagged for liquidation. Negative revenue 3 quarters straight. You thinking what I think you're thinking?" Marcus exhaled, half smile forming. "Can you ping the servicer?" Avery gave a low whistle. "You don't waste time, do you?" "All right, give me a minute." Naomi, standing nearby, looked at him with a mix of worry and reluctant admiration. "Marcus," she said, "please tell me you're not trying to buy a hotel in the middle of a thunderstorm." He glanced over at her, rain dripping from his hair, eyes calm and certain. "Not trying," he said, "doing." Lila clutched Ruth's hand, half curious, half asleep. Ruth just nodded once, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this version of her son to show up. Avery's voice returned through the speaker. "Okay, I texted my contact at First Horizon. Her name's Carla Mendez, asset manager on duty tonight. She's the one who handles hotel receiverships. I told her you're ready to talk numbers." Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed again, an incoming call. "That was fast," he murmured, then swiped to connect. "Mr. Ellis?" The voice was smooth, professional, with the controlled tone of someone who negotiated over dinner instead of desks. "Carla Mendez, First Horizon. I hear you have interest in the Wayfarer." "I do," Marcus said, stepping closer to the awning's edge, letting the rain hit his shoes. "I have proof of funds and a management plan ready to go. The brand's got a liability issue, one that just turned personal." "Personal?" Carla asked. "My family was refused service tonight on a paid reservation," he said. "I have documentation, photos, and time-stamped video from the lobby. If the franchise owner is this careless, the asset's worth less every hour they run it. Let me take it off your hands before it bleeds out." There was a beat of silence on her end, not hesitation, but calculation. Then came the faint rustle of papers, the sound of a keyboard being tapped. Marcus imagined her office, fluorescent light, spreadsheets open, the hum of late-night HVAC. "It's Sunday, Mr. Ellis," she said finally, though the tone carried more curiosity than resistance. "I can make it formal tonight," Marcus said. "I'll wire an earnest deposit within the hour. We assume temporary management under an interim agreement pending close. You get revenue stabilization, I get the keys. Everyone wins." There was a pause, murdered conversation coming through the line, Carla conferring with someone off screen. Then, "Non-refundable deposit," she said, her voice returning. "72-hour due diligence window, 30-day close. If your management plan clears our compliance list, we'll authorize interim control." "You think you can move that fast?" Marcus's reflection looked back at him from the glass door of the lobby. Inside, Dylan was still there, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. That, Marcus thought, was about to change. He turned toward Naomi. "They're asking if we can move in minutes." Naomi met his eyes, no hesitation now, just quiet resolve. She nodded once, slow and sure. "Do it." Marcus lifted the phone again. "Send me the DocuSign," he said to Carla. "You'll have the wire before your confirmation email lands." Another pause. Then Carla's voice softened, almost impressed. "All right, Mr. Ellis, let's make history on a Sunday night." The line clicked off. The rain kept falling, relentless but lighter now, like applause in the distance. Avery's voice came back through text seconds later. "You really just did that, didn't you?" Marcus typed one reply. "They locked the wrong door." He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned back toward the glass. The lobby lights still glowed, sterile and indifferent. But this time, when Marcus looked at them, he didn't see rejection. He saw fluorescent real estate waiting to be claimed. The storm had eased, leaving only the soft percussion of water dripping from the eaves and the distant hum of tires on wet asphalt. The world seemed to hold its breath as Marcus's phone vibrated in his hand. Deposit received. Interim control agreement executed. Compliance approval pending final brand notice. He stared at the message for a long second. The words were plain, clinical, but they changed everything. A short vibration on a rainy night, and the balance of power had shifted. Avery's follow-up text came seconds later. "Wires confirmed. You're officially the operator. Congratulations, boss." Marcus wiped the screen with his sleeve and looked toward the hotel. The glass doors glowed warm against the dark. Inside, the same lobby, the same air, the same silence, but it no longer belonged to the same people. He turned to Naomi, whose expression was equal parts disbelief and awe. "It's done," he said simply. She blinked. "You mean?" He nodded. "We're not just staying here tonight, we're running it." For a moment she said nothing, just let the words land, heavy but satisfying.
Then she smiled faintly. "Then let's make it worth owning." They crossed the parking lot, puddles reflecting the blue-gray dawn of a clearing sky. Ruth's hand rested gently on Leela's shoulder, guiding her toward the revolving door that had closed them out less than an hour ago. Now it turned for them like an opening act. Inside, the lobby still smelled of lemon cleaner and cheap coffee. Dylan Hart stood behind the counter, half leaning, half hiding behind the computer screen. When he saw Marcus and his family step inside, he straightened instantly, his throat tightening. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Hart, right?" The young man nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "My name is Marcus Ellis," Marcus said, removing his damp jacket and folding it neatly over his arm. His voice carried the calm weight of someone who no longer needed to ask permission. "As of 5 minutes ago, I'm the incoming operator of this property. If performance meets projection, I'll be the new owner by month's end." Dylan's mouth opened, then closed again. The air between them seemed to hum. "I'd like 2 rooms," Marcus continued, "and an all-hands meeting in the lobby in 10 minutes. For a second, Dylan didn't move. His mind struggled to reconcile the roles. Guest turned owner, complaint turned command. I was just," he stammered, voice small now. "I was following policy. We had incident." Naomi stepped forward, her tone quiet but firm. "There were no incidents tonight," she said, "just bias. And a child standing in the rain." The words struck like truth, not loud, not cruel, but undeniable. Dylan's face flushed. He looked down at the counter, at his trembling hands. He wasn't a villain, Marcus saw. He was a man built on fear disguised as protocol. The kind of person systems rely on, too obedient to question, too uncertain to stand up. Marcus let the silence stretch just long enough to make it real, then broke it with action. "Gather your team, please, now." 10 minutes later, the lobby buzzed with cautious murmurs. The staff assembled, the night auditor with tattoos peeking from his sleeves, 2 housekeepers in worn sneakers, a maintenance lead with calloused hands and a coffee cup the size of hope. They looked tired but curious, their eyes darting between Dylan and the man who'd just rewritten their reality. Marcus stood by the reception desk. No podium, no grand gesture, just presence. "I won't take much of your time," he began. "You've all worked hard to keep this place alive. But as of tonight, this hotel has new management and a new standard." He placed his phone on the counter, its screen still glowing with the confirmation email. "There's a new agreement in place. My team will handle operations effective immediately. Every one of you still has a job, but we're changing how things are done here." The maintenance lead, a broad man with a gentle voice, raised an eyebrow. "Change how, exactly?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Starting with training. Everyone gets paid sessions this week. We're revising protocols to match what hospitality actually means. You'll also get a new bonus system for 5-star guest reviews. If the guests shine, you do too." He let that sink in. A few staff members exchanged cautious glances, hope flickering like the lobby light above them. "Now," Marcus said, his tone sharpening, "about last night. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, but what happened at this desk can't happen again. Not here, not ever. This place will no longer hide behind the words policy or discretion. Every guest deserves to be welcomed, not judged." His gaze met Dylan's. The young clerk swallowed hard. "I'm not firing you tonight," Marcus said, "but you're off the desk until you complete bias training and guest recovery drills. When you pass, you'll come back stronger. If you don't, hospitality isn't your calling. Understand?" Dylan nodded quickly, eyes glassy with a mix of shame and relief. "Yes, sir." Marcus's expression softened. "Good. Because people don't grow from punishment, they grow from accountability." Ruth stepped forward, reaching into the key rack where 3 brass fobs still hung. She took one down, polished it gently against her sleeve, and handed it to Lila. "Baby," she said, "would you like to check us in?" Lila's eyes widened. She looked up at Dylan, not angry, just curious, almost kind. "My name is Lila Ellis," she said, the words careful but bright. The entire room went still. For the first time that night, Dylan smiled, a small, uncertain thing, but real. He slid the key across the counter with trembling hands. "Welcome to the Wayfarer Inn, Miss Ellis." Naomi exhaled softly. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting the moment settle like dawn over wet ground. The hotel felt different now. Same walls, same floor, but alive with something it hadn't known in years: integrity. Outside, the storm had passed. The first trace of sunrise touched the horizon, painting gold across the soaked pavement. And for the first time since they'd arrived, the Wayfarer Inn looked open for business.
Morning crept gently over the Wayfarer Inn, gilding the wet parking lot in pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean, and for the first time in years, the place smelled not of dust and disinfectant, but of coffee, strong, fresh, and hopeful. Behind the front desk, taped neatly to the brass bell stand, a new sign read, "Welcome in." 2 words, simple, unassuming, but enough to change the story of a building. The neon vacancy still hummed outside, its red glow reflecting in the glass doors, but now the sound felt different, not hollow, not mocking. It hissed like a promise kept. Avery arrived just after sunrise, still in his wrinkled blazer from the night before, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. The maintenance lead, a broad man named Carlos, joined him for a slow walk through the halls. The 2 men spoke quietly, jotting notes: broken light fixtures, scuffed walls, a boiler that needed mercy, not miracles. Avery circled each problem in blue ink. "This is a fixer," he said with a half smile. Carlos shrugged. "Everything worth saving is." They passed a housekeeper humming softly as she pushed her cart, the melody drifting down the hall like sunlight through curtains. She looked up, nodded at them, and kept going. Avery watched her disappear around the corner. "You're going to make this place sing again," he murmured, and he meant it. By mid-morning, an email chimed through on Marcus's phone. Carla's team at First Horizon. Interim control acknowledged. Buyer of record, Ellis Hospitality, LLC. The formal confirmation was cold in language, but warm in meaning. The hotel was theirs now, at least enough of it to begin changing what it stood for. By noon, Naomi was behind the counter, greeting guests as if she'd done it her whole life. 3 travelers, soaked and road-tired from a night of detours, stood uncertainly at the desk. Without hesitation, she handed them warm towels, steaming coffee, and keys. "Rooms are on us," she said. "Everyone deserves a dry place to rest." They tried to protest, but she waved them off. "Pay it forward," she smiled. "That's how we keep the lights on." Ruth, meanwhile, sat in the small back office with 2 housekeepers and the maintenance lead, discussing wages over a pot of tea. Her tone was steady, businesslike, but kind. "Fair pay builds loyalty," she said. "Loyalty builds pride. Pride keeps rooms clean long after the money's spent." They nodded, understanding more from her conviction than any spreadsheet could show. The wage increase would squeeze the budget, yes, but Ruth had never measured wealth in margins. That afternoon, the old front desk computer beeped as Dylan clocked in for training. His face was pale, his shirt too neatly ironed, the armor of a man trying to start over. The corporate trainer, a woman named Denise who'd run luxury hotels for decades, met him with patient eyes and a voice that carried both firmness and grace. "Hospitality isn't about rooms," she said, tapping the counter between them. "It's about courage. Fear wears a tie and calls itself policy, but real service, that's the opposite of fear." Dylan listened. He didn't argue. For the first time in a long while, he didn't hide behind protocol. He wrote notes in the margins of his manual, the ink bleeding slightly where his hand shook. By the time he left the room, his shoulders were a little straighter. Evening settled warm and golden. Reporters had begun to circle the story, whispers spreading about the family who'd been refused and returned as owners. When one local journalist asked Marcus for a quote, expecting anger or triumph, he offered neither. "The point isn't his face," Marcus said, nodding toward the building, its sign glowing softly above him. "The point is the door, who it opens for, and who it doesn't." The reporter lowered her pen. "So what happens now?" Marcus smiled. "Now we make sure it opens for everyone." That night, the Ellises gathered in the small cafe at the edge of the lobby, a forgotten corner the previous owners had abandoned when profits dipped. Naomi had brought back her grandmother's recipe for sweet tea. Ruth had baked cornbread in the tiny convection oven behind the counter. Lila sat at the table, chin resting on her folded arms, sleep heavy in her eyes but joy wide awake in her smile. She lined up the brass key fobs in front of her, counting them softly. "One for every room," she said, "one for every story." Marcus looked around the space, the same walls that had turned them away less than 24 hours earlier. Now they were filled with laughter, warmth, and the low hum of new beginnings. Staff moved between tables, relaxed, smiling. The lobby light glowed soft and steady. He raised his paper coffee cup, the kind that still smelled faintly of cardboard and victory. "To buying what tried to shut us out," he said, voice low but strong. "To teaching it how to open." Naomi clinked her cup to his. "To building something better." Ruth lifted hers next. "To keeping it kind." Avery grinned. "And solvent." The staff joined in, a dozen voices layered in laughter. It wasn't a toast of grandeur, but of grounding. People reclaiming their dignity and purpose under one roof. Outside, the vacancy sign buzzed softly in the night, but it no longer glared like a warning. It glowed like an invitation, a beacon that said there's room here now. And for the first time, the Wayfarer Inn truly lived up to its name. A home for travelers, wanderers, and anyone still learning how to belong.